Ironically, though, I spoke to Philando on July 5th of 2016. We spoke about the murder of Alton Sterling. I don't know if you knew that. We spoke about because Alton Sterling was murdered on July 5th of 2016, and we were so numb about the killing of Alton Sterling. I can remember like yesterday, we were like, I mean, nothing gonna happen to that police officer,
Right.
you know. And I walk right in the store. I got a 6-pack of Heineken, man. You know, not even thinking that the very next day, man, which was July 6th, 2016, that my friend would lose his life, like pretty much the same way we just discussed, you know. But you know, back in 2016, I was really, really upset about the negative press that Philando was getting and how people were talking about him had marijuana in the car. And, you know, what we forget is that there was a baby girl in the backseat of the car and a
Yeah.
bullet nearly missed her. And Philando probably still be smoking his weed, though, you know, if y'all had not racially profiled him and killed him. But you know, I went from machinist to activist immediately because I wanted people to know my friend loved to play chess and he played the Xbox and you know, yeah, he made us smoke marijuana, but so there's a lot of other people.
This is
you
a
know.
real person. This is a man.
Right? You know,
It's
so
a human.
I watched Philando take $1.40 out of his pocket and put in the cash register for kids who couldn't even afford to pay their lunch. You know, they were taking lunches from people back then
Yeah, I know.
and giving them cheese sandwiches. And Philando could have lost his job for paying for student lunch. I watched Philando like weave through children, man, and know they put that milk down, man. You're lactose intolerant and you can't have that. It's got peanuts in it. You know, there's a list behind him with the kids' food allergies, but he knew these kids. Like I watched that. And so I
Ain't have to look at no list. He knew him.
I wanted people to understand, like, this is who was murdered, not some thug that robbed the doggone gas station. You know, that's what we do. You know, Philando was pulled over because he fit the description of someone who robbed a gas station. Like, we just rob a gas station and drive right past it the very next day because that's what black people do. You know, we just right past the same gas station we robbed. But he was ultimately racially profiled and murdered. And so I just wanted people to understand, like, this was a real human being, man, like who really loved the kids. I remember him saying that, like, man, I love the kids. And you know, it was a part of the last conversation we had, man. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I walk in the store, like not knowing that this was the last thing I was gonna hear that man say was, man, I love the kids. Now, when he said that, I'm thinking the Trick Daddy. When he said that, I'm not thinking that those were the last words that I heard him say. He said, man, I love everybody. I'm like, whatever, man. I walk in the store and the next day my friend's murdered, man. And so I promised legislators back in 2016 that we were going to put people in place to replace some of the people who were responsible for some of this bad legislation that creates, and back then the big thing was the use of force statute. Yep. I just wanted people to look at the use of force statute, man, and change the wording, which allow officers to say, I was in fear for my life.
Yep.
And that statute actually it exonerates police officers because I can do that to an officer and they can kill me.
Yeah.
Because the language in this doggone statute says that this is exactly one of the situations they could be in where they could defend themselves, right? And so, but nobody was listening to me. Then I started thinking about, well, who put this into legislation?
Mm-hmm. Who wrote the language?
Who wrote the language, right? Let me figure that out. And I figured that it was at the state capitol. Let me be clear, like I talked to the incumbent, Tim Mahoney, and I want to get to some of your questions, man.
We good. This is a part of your introduction.
I talked to the incumbent and I told him I was running, and he said I'd probably be better off as a city councilman or a commissioner. And I said, but the disparities that I see, some of the things that I want to change, happen at a state level, right? And
I just don't want to write legislation for St. Paul. I just want to write legislation for Ramsey County. I want to have impacts over the entire state.
He retired. And I'm thinking, like, I always think Philando's watching me, man. So I'm thinking, like, oh man, Philando's like moving something. And then like every step of the way since I've been running in this race, man, like the things that I thought that I couldn't do, I overcome. And it's like, I got a calling over my life, man. And my friends watching me. I lost my mother too, like a few weeks after I lost Philando, I lost my mother. But I promised both of them that I was going to do work to make them both happy. And I promised legislators also in 2016 that we were going to put people in place to replace them. I'm just making good on my promise. I don't know if you think about back when Philando was murdered in 2016, man, we were talking about how we fix police community relations, right? And the buzzwords I think were back then were de-escalation training is needed, and implicit bias training is needed, and more training. You can't train a racist how to be unracist. You can't just
They must be replaced.
You're right. But nevertheless, we had a brand new training facility built like 4 blocks from my house, right? Off of the back of the blood of Philando's body, man. Because if Philando wasn't murdered, we wouldn't even be talking about this type of training. Okay? Now, think about this, and then I'll move. We had an opportunity to save George Floyd's life in 2016. If we were serious about police reform, if we were serious about changing the way that policing is done here in this state, we could have did that in 2016, but instead we talked about implicit bias training and de-escalation training and training people how to be nice. Either you have it or you don't. Well, here's something that I want to share with you. In George Floyd's situation, man, we could talk a little bit more about George Floyd. In George Floyd's situation, the officer that had his knee on his neck was the training sergeant. So let's just be clear about the training, because what I saw was the training sergeant training the other officers how they treat black people. How you treat black? $20 got this whole state set on fire, man, and people still don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a true statement. $20 bill got this whole state set on fire, and we still right here. The people like blind. Like we have a police problem. We have a police problem, and it's embedded it's in every police station throughout this state. We have a police problem, and I'll say this. In Duluth, Minnesota, years ago, there were 3 black men hung. Right? I say that to say that there was an audience. There was an audience watching and cheering and like, yes, like in Duluth, 2 hours away from here. It was a black man hung. Where do you think their grandkids went? You think their uncles and their kids, that ideology never left here. It just got more advanced, man. And a lot of them became legislators and police officers, school teachers. They used to beat us for learning. Now they just call it achievement gap. School teachers, doctors, public pretenders. Some of them are even county prosecutors. I'm talking about the people with some of the people that were in this crowd. They had grandkids, and their grandkids had kids, and you know what I mean. And this the racism never left the state of Minnesota, man. It's here, and it's embedded in. I hate to say it, some of these police stations, legislation, in these hospitals, in the courtroom. If you think I'm spewing rhetoric, why is that black man have it so hard? It sucks to be a black man here in this state. You know what I mean?